Hi, I'm Paula from Earth Moves, and I'm here with my friend Dr. Jessica Bockler in our beautiful polytunnel that we've populated with a lot of gorgeous plants, which we're now harvesting because it's the end of the season. So yeah, I feel really blessed to be here. I'm really happy to be interviewing Dr. Jessica Bockler because she was my supervisor for my dissertation on spiritual dance, and her course that she co-runs with Les Lancaster is really responsible for a lot of the work that I'm doing now. The Masters in Transpersonal Psychology and Spirituality and Consciousness that I did really helped to organise my thoughts and plans and ambitions in an academic way to move on to this part of my career, what I'm doing now. So I'd recommend anyone in those sorts of fields to do the Masters if that's something they want to do. But then I got back in touch with Jess a couple of years ago because Earth Moves received funding from the Alef's Conscious Community Project, where we were looking at how nature can inspire spiritual feelings and raise consciousness and generally, try and create a better world. So Jess, I'm just so blessed to have you here. You're such a big influence on my life, and the ideas that I have now are thanks to your mentorship. So thank you so much for that. Could you just expand a bit more on the things that you do and what led you to running the Alef Community Project, as well as the academic things that you do as well?
Sure thing.
It's beautiful and rainy here today, guys, so we're just enjoying this cozy polytunnel feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you more. It's partly tied into my personal journey, and then the Alef Trust, of course, is a kind of endeavour by a group of people who have come together and who are building this community. And it started with Les and myself, but there are other members of the community who are really building and building the output of the Alef Trust, both on the academic end and on the sort of applied end. So, and the Conscious Community Project is the applied branch of the Alef Trust, together with a few other projects that we're running, like Creative Alternatives, for example, which is the Arts and Mental Health Project that actually predates the Alef Trust and has been running in Sefton and now runs in St Helens, so in Merseyside, in the local area here. And that's Creative Alternatives, is still, and it continues under the auspices of the Alef Trust. Where start? I can start with my own personal journey and unpack a little bit how that.
I'd like to see that.
Sure, yeah. So I came to the UK about 20 years ago now, 25 I think it is actually longer, 1996. And that was to study at the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts, where I was doing community arts. And already then I had a deep interest in how creativity has an impact on people's lives. So I was out doing community projects here in Merseyside, and also working internationally. I had very early on an opportunity to get involved with the Council of Europe in a mediation project, a conflict resolution project. And this opened my eyes to the potential of creative practice and kind of heart-based practices, deep listening, deep relational practices, to making a difference in people's lives, individually and collectively. And that took me on a long journey through the theatre arts and very embodied physical theatre, into parapsychology for a time, because I was fascinated by paranormal phenomena, and then into transpersonal psychology and how we can understand embodied creative practices and their psychosomatic effect, their impact. So I went on a master's journey, because at the time at Liverpool John Moores University, learned about transpersonal psychology, consciousness studies. Les was running courses there at the time. And then, a few years down the road, I got my PhD under my belt, bringing all those areas of interest together, which is another whole journey in its own right, another story. But then in 2012, we funded the Alef Trust. We haven't looked back. We're nearly now in our 10th year.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you're doing extremely important work. It's work I've come to understand and I really support it. The thing why I love transpersonal psychology the most is because it encompasses ideas that aren't just about the individual and sort of like how we are as a person is more of a nebulous entity rather than just this individual ego based sort of person. But I'm really interested in how our individual behaviour spirals out and affects the collective. And I know you are too. Could you just explain with like consciousness studies in mind, how does that work? How do the changes that I make in myself through meditation, through self-reflection, through consciousness raising, through connecting with nature and whatnot, how does this change me and how is my changes affecting everyone?
It's a wonderful question. And one that goes really deep. You know, I've got this image now of Alice going down the rabbit hole.
Wow.
And we could be going down.
Sounds
And,
cool.
it's just so fascinating. And for me, that's like an ongoing inquiry. And I'm just thinking in terms of how transpersonal psychology evolved there, because when that field first came about in the 1960s and 70s, it was very oriented towards the individual, right? Self-individuation, discovering oneself through these practices that were brought in from the East. And also when you look at the writings of many transpersonal psychologists at the time, they were very much about going inward, introspective, contemplative, meditation, you name it, going into the self and kind of this deep self-search. And in that first wave of the movement, as I'd like to call it, it felt a bit detached from the world at large, from nature at large. And what we're seeing now, I think, in more recent years, is a development, kind of outward movement, a realization that, well, hang on, when we're going inward and we're connecting to this sense of something higher, beyond ourselves, a higher self, that higher self is not detached from nature. That higher self is actually something that puts us in touch with nature at large, with the world at large. So when we're undertaking these practices, when we're really getting in touch with the whole of our being through integrative practices, through practices that maybe improve our diet, improve working on us on a physical level, emotional level, mental level, spiritual level, then we're getting in touch with the world at large, with nature at large, because ideas like the collective psyche, the collective psyche is, when you kind of really look at it and you go into quantum physics and the kind of, that deep end of the pool, the individual and the collective are one. You're coming to one source, a place of a kind of unified field, if you will.
I just feel like it just came to me then that the feminine energy seems to be expanding within transpersonal psychology, and the feminine is naturally always concerned with the collective and nurturing of people and nature. Certainly speaking with you and the two other speakers recently, incredibly a great opportunity for me to be with you three because you're all incredible, and that nurturing feminine energy seems to be having more of an effect in a lot of different dimensions. Would you agree with that?
Completely. I feel
and how
like
important is that vibration of nurturing and conservation?
I feel it's completely central. I feel we're moving away from the more masculine paradigm, which kind of maybe could be archetypally described as the sort of hero's journey, the individual going out into the world with the sword, slaying the dragon. We're moving away from that towards a much more holistic and rounded understanding of how we as individuals are part of a larger field, a larger collective, and how we need to be held and nurtured within that.
Jess. I'm so glad that someone like you is having that influence. I really am, because I love people like Stanislav Grof and people like that. I've learned so much from them. But people like Ken Wilber, for my sort of mind, it's all like a diagram, and that it's so like male and unfathomable to the likes of me, who looks at things very creatively and holistically, that it's so great to see that more holistic, feminine dimension going on. What are the plans for transpersonal psychology? How do you see this what we're discussing now? How is this going to develop and expand? And are there other people like you, other women like you, with these ambitions? I love the way, by the way, you integrate creativity, because it's absolutely essential for mental health and for spiritual health as well, to express yourself in this 3D world, to see the self-revelation that comes from dance and comes from art is so important. And many academic people, very male-centered people, don't really get that and don't engage in it. You know, I don't like any group being sort of like in this pyramid that capitalism creates, where there's a certain group, white male, middle class, upper class, and then it gradually goes down, and the lesser beings like women and, you know, have less of a chance in life. I think that ideology needs to be challenged all the time. What do you think about that?
I completely agree.
Really? Oh, great.
Well, one thing I would say is, you know, people like Wilbur are still quite revered, right? Because
yes,
we're still, particularly academia, we're still in that paradigm which puts the intellect there, right? Intellectual discernment. Don't get me wrong, I value that. It's an important piece, right? But education is incomplete if there isn't also a kind of holistic and deep self-search, which includes a space for soul. We need a space for soul in education, right? Where we're creating spaces of inquiry that enable us to dwell in the questions and in the uncertainties and in the ambiguities. And we don't have all the answers. Academics so often feel like they're needing to kind of portray their expertise. And I really, in recent years, I've embraced that much more. When the students now come into our programs, I say to them, we're in a place where we're practicing unlearning, because there is so much. It's difficult for people to understand. That's the trouble. They need a bit of courage, and that's one of the things I do, Paula. I try to build courage for people to go into spaces where they can say, I do not know, and I surrender to not knowing. And in the not knowing, I then get a sense to, perhaps there is something higher that wants to speak through me, and if I can just open up to that, then wow, there's intellectual discernment, yes, that's got a role to play, but there's also this other piece, you know, where we need to honour the larger intelligences that are operating through us.
I just wondered if you could accredit this rather broad understanding, this holistic understanding of life and evolution to some of your embodied practices that you've done, like your physical movement workshops and acting skills and things like that. Have you assimilated all these things into this theory and then created this synthesis of your own that's really quite unique to you and your own experiences and learnings, some of them within the body as well? Very much, very much.
You know, for me, what was my sort of journey of initiation was my PhD. And people always think, oh, PhD, that sounds totally intellectual, and you know, and it wasn't. It was and it wasn't. So to begin with, it was a self-search. I was looking for people who were pursuing theatre practices that weren't just about performance, but that were about developing those psychosomatic technologies for really kind of deep diving into the body-mind and discovering, what are we? And I met some fantastic people along the way. So it was about a 7-year journey that I was on with my PhD. And I went to Italy, where I studied with certain theatre practitioners coming from the Grotowski route, so kind of growing out of Poland. Eugenio Barber, for example, was one who's now, you know, working with Odin Teatret in Denmark. We were on tour with a piece and we worked intensively. But then also two practitioners based in the United States, Antro Ali, who is kind of on the West Coast, who's in Portland now, and Matt Nittler with the Theatre Ensemble Jetchi in New York City. And I spent some time with them, and we went into a kind of deep dive using theatrical technology, if you will, practices, methods, to really explore. Right, how can I describe this? Picture us in rooms at night, working in the darkness of night, because when you go into the night, you go into a dream mode. The intellect is more subdued, right? So we were working at night, or in the evenings, late evenings, and we were working with themes that were coming from alchemical traditions. That was with Ali, and we were exploring these alchemical themes through the body, through movement, spontaneous movement and voice work. And this transported me into altered states of consciousness that were incredibly powerful. Yeah. Just thinking of the power of the rain right now. The work that we were doing with Antro in those theatre laboratories was just, it was profound. But it's difficult to explain to people. You know, when I just give some indication, well, we were working with spontaneous movement and voice work. If you'd look from the outside in, you wouldn't understand it, but from the inside, the work took me really deeply into altered states of consciousness and into a kind of sense I'm connecting to something other than myself. It's beyond me.
Could you tell me more about the mechanisms of how movement changes our psychological state and even our brain waves? How does it do that?
Well, we're whole beings, right?
Yeah.
So if you do something on a physical level, it'll have an effect on the psyche or psychologically, right? All of those systems, whether it's physiological, whether it's emotional, spiritual, cognitive, they're all interconnected. So just to give you an example then, in terms of using theatre and voice work, you can, how would I describe it? Maybe if I tell you a little bit about my own practice and,
yes,
how I work with that in order
to
change my state, in order to then perhaps maybe improve my mood, or if I'm trying to solve a creative problem, or I'm even working on a paper, I'm writing something academic, right? I work with these practices. So I would begin maybe with warming up the body, just kind of bringing myself to a slightly more alert state, so I'm a bit more awake and alert, but also receptive. So not just kind of cognitively awake, but kind of physically really awake. I might do some yoga practice, I might do some stretching, I might even go, if it's early in the morning, I might go for a walk in the woods and then come back and do a physical practice at home. And then building on that, when I kind of feel like, okay, something's gotten flowing, then I'm noticing I've got imagery that's arising, or maybe I'm sensing, oh, I'd like to vocalize, there's a sound, there's like a breath pattern, a rhythm, and I follow through with that. So I call it active receptivity. I'm receptive to what wants to happen next, and I'm then following through. I'm letting that express itself through me. So it might become a song, it might become a playing with the shadows on the floor of my office, for example, if the morning sun is spilling in and I'm seeing the shadows move through me. It might become a bit of writing suddenly. And often I don't sit down at the computer, but I take a piece of paper and I write on the floor, so I can stay more grounded and connected to the floor. And then I'm building on that, and I'm again noticing, right, I'm working on a paper, say, and I'm stuck with a particular section. I might go to the book that I've been reading, look at that, sense into that section that I'm just working on, and images will unfold. Then I might pick up the pen and I might sketch the image. Then I might put that piece of paper on the floor and step into the image to see, what arises in the body when I'm stepping into the image. And it's a kind of never-ending flow. It's amazing what happens if you just trust that and follow through.
And very magical as well, using things that I would describe as magical practice, which again, our ancestors probably just did all the time. And a lot of non-industrial people, this disenchantment with the body and with nature as well, because those two things are so connected, has actually been quite detrimental for people's mental health, because now we have, obviously there's problems, but there's also a lot of conveniences, yet people are generally, there's a malaise of unhappiness which obviously is to do with the system as well. I don't know, blame individuals as well. On the other hand, people don't engage in simple things which make them feel better a lot of the time.
I think a big piece is consumerism, right?
Yeah,
that we're so
indeed.
And we're so used to consuming things, taking things into ourselves, sort of downloading and not listening in and not paying attention to our own creative impulses. And kind of that consumerism, and you want to sit down in the evening, sit on the couch and watch a film, by all means, we all do it. But if you do it too much, then inertia sets in as well, and you're just like you feel like a sack of potatoes, right? You don't want to move anymore, you just kind of fill yourself up with this external stuff. And the more you do that, the more you kind of blot out the inner experience. You anesthetize yourself, right?
That emptiness can't be really filled with shoes and bags and whatnot. And that's what people are always trying to do. And then there's, I suppose, the other thing of people's competitiveness that they're programmed to have. But I'd just like to ask, as an environmentalist, this is a really important question for me, because I can see how transpersonal psychology is needed in that debate. Because we do need to focus on the individual's conscious state as well. How does the ideas, or could or should the ideas of transpersonal psychology feed into the environmental movement, do you think, in your opinion?
It's a wonderful question. And I feel what's really needed, I'm looking at the individual first of all, I'm sensing we need to all consider what small actions we can take to make a difference, and not to believe that those small actions will be irrelevant or insignificant, because a butterfly's wings can change the world. So really, I deeply believe that small actions can have ripple effects, and through those ripple effects cause bigger changes to occur. And then the kind of actions we need to take aren't just outer actions, where, okay, great, outer actions are fantastic. By that I mean maybe doing the cycling, maybe taking the bike rather than the car, or walking. That's fantastic. Buying recycled clothing, buying second-hand clothing. You know what I'm saying. Those actions are fantastic, but also inner actions. So actions of contemplation, reflection, mindfulness, to realize, to notice how interconnected we are with the world, with nature at large. If we don't practice, then it's difficult to feel that or to realize that, but that connection is there. So if we practice just small moments of mindfulness, or dedicating ourselves to keeping the land the way you do here, or even just going out for a walk and connecting to nature, then we can feel that more, we can feel that interconnectedness, and that will help us make other actions happen in our lives, and it'll have a ripple effect on the people around us. So that's individual.
I think it's great that a lot of schools teach mindfulness meditation now, because like you say, the insights that you get and the feelings of energetic connection with everything else, I think if you don't, if you're in the normal state of consciousness, you don't really have that sense of connection like you do when you're in altered states of consciousness. So I guess having some sort of practice like meditation, where we change our consciousness, and then we receive a different type of information. It
opens up the reducing valve, right? Aldous Huxley used right? So there's an expansion, or the aperture of awareness opens up.
This thing about developing this like kind of eco-consciousness is really important, and we've discussed like a variety of ways to kind of do that. Can you tell me why you, as a transpersonal psychologist, what you've seen about the importance of change for the environment? We are in an environmental crisis at the moment. Do you think people are fully addressing that? Do you think big business is fully addressing that? And do you think that the changes are enough? And what changes can we make in our own behaviours, other than the normal one, recycling, which of course we must all do as much as possible. How can we be to our neighbours and friends and communities which are going to help us along?
It's such a big question, Paula, and I feel like, goodness me, how to begin to answer that one? I feel I come back to what is it that I can do and what is it that Alef Trust can possibly do. We're in such dire straits with this, right? We're in really deep trouble, and most people don't realise it, are sort of sleepwalking into this. When you look at the reports that have come out from the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, the material is shocking, deeply shocking. I mean, I read that and I couldn't sleep at night. I cried. I've been crying now for the last 2 years since when I really woke up to it.
Yeah.
And it's not something that is often spoken about, right? There are headlines, we hear some things, and we hear about there was a flood in Germany, in part of Germany, actually not far from where my parents live, where houses were washed away. Then there are fires in Northern California, or in California generally, or in Australia. But these things in some ways feel far away for people and people's everyday lives, where they're just carrying on as normal. But we can't do that anymore. We really all have to change, from our individual behaviour to global corporations. So change seems to come. It seems to be difficult for individuals. Yeah, there are certain reasons for why we struggle to change, because we're sort of habituated. We do things in a certain way, and we don't like to give things up that are about creature comforts and ease. But then also systemically, it seems to be difficult, right? But that larger systems struggle to change. They're like tankers turning like really slow.
Yeah.
So one way that we address it in the Alef Trust is, the Alef Trust is about education. And I feel dedicated to the path of education in as a way of opening people's eyes to the crisis and the things that they may each be able to do to make a difference. Education, we work in transpersonal psychology, so we explore those transpersonal and integrative practices that people can do for themselves, but also maybe embed in their organizations. So you can have an impact on an organization, absolutely. If you can begin to integrate practices at an organizational level, not just for individuals coming in saying, hey, I'm doing a bit of mindfulness, but maybe find ways to open meetings with mindfulness practices. That the whole mindset of an organization could potentially shift.
It has to, Jess, because if there isn't a shift, then there just won't be a world. That's the choice that they've got. Are you going to continue pumping out pollution from fossil fuels when you could be investing in solar power and other renewables? Or are we going to have species annihilation, human annihilation? The sad fact is that the people on this planet that create the least pollution suffer the most. That's the tragedy of it. I think there's a lot.
At least we're in the developed world. So isolated from those events. We don't see it. And we carry on with our, consumerist and indulgent behaviours.
Well, it's quite Freudian in the sense it's all about denial and, Jungian ideas of projecting, the shadow self onto people and demonizing some people, blaming some people when it's not even their fault. I've noticed that there's kind of more homophobia, it's more racism now than there was a couple of years ago. And divided we fall. I love diversity, I love biodiversity and people diversity. And that's what we need to do now. I think we need to link together. We need to be educated, like you said. We need to change our consciousness in positive ways, have practices that illuminate these ideas. This is why I love the Alef Trust and the work that you do. We really benefited from the grant that we got off you, because I was able to initiate a lot of those practices with our groups, and that's really helped a lot of people. So, you know, in our little way, you know, you've really helped introduce the ideas from transpersonal psychology to normal people, getting into Jung and Graph and people like that. And that's directly thanks to you guys. And my own education of you means that I could practically apply some of these ideas to my work. So is there anything else that you'd like to add? I just want to say I've really enjoyed talking to you. It's been so special. You really are doing such incredible work, and I really hope the Alef community grows and grows.
Thank you.
And your work, you know, I really have seen a lot of diversity, which I haven't seen in the rest of transpersonal psychology. More women, more brown people, more black people, more neurodiverse people seem to be involved, you know, seem to be welcome in those circles. So I think with that diversity comes a lot of strength. A lot of voices create more of a detailed explanation of reality.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it, Paula, actually. Thank you for that. And I feel that really at the heart of all the work that we do at Alef Trust is that sense of community building, giving a place, creating a space where the sacred is honoured, where the whole person is honoured as well as our larger nature, and a space where people can really feel they can connect to like-minded people and explore and engage in inquiry around these topics. Because, you know, there's a lot of polarization out in the world today, and we need to create spaces where we can meet and strengthen ourselves so we can go out into the world and encounter those who are polarizing, not in aggressive ways, but in ways that enable a heart space to open.
Wow.
We need to connect to those people and bring peace, you know, we don't need to add fuel to the fire.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for this absolutely beautiful connection. I'm feeling quite moved and certainly educated again by you. So the future then, what is transpersonal psychology, what is Alef doing? In a nutshell, what are your plans and what are your responses to the environmental crisis?
We will keep galvanizing community.
Wow.
And that worldwide. So the Conscious Community Project is now 2 years in. We received funding for those 2 years, but there's no doubt that we're going to continue with the initiative because that is what's needed in the world today. And it's about, yes, galvanizing people online so that they can then work locally wherever they are, to network and create hubs, to build their own communities of practice.
Yes.
Because we need local communities of practice to prepare ourselves for what's coming, because it could be serious, it could be... I still live in hope. I live in hope that humanity will survive what is coming, but what is coming in terms of climate change could be quite severe. So we need to prepare ourselves on all levels, not just prepping in terms of survival,
mentally,
but how can we thrive?
Spiritually,
exactly, that's right. Yeah.
Well, Jess, you're just doing incredible work. You keep going, and thank you for supporting Earth Moves, because that's made a big difference to the local community in this way, so thank you so much. So of course we'll put the website for the Alef Trust in the description below. Please visit their website, and if anyone's interested in doing the MSc, I would really recommend it. Thank you so much, Jess, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!